Hi, everyone. I'm joining everyone a minute or so early, hoping that we're not going to have any technical difficulties today, and we'll get started soon about with our discussion. Okay, so it's 11 o'clock. Again, thank you for joining me today. My name is Yelena. I'm a Canadian citizenship and immigration lawyer at Rashid Yurosevic LLP. And today we're going to be talking about the impact of COVID-19 on Canadian immigration and citizenship applications. So first of all, I hope that you're all staying safe and getting used to our new reality of working from home for most people. We're all in this together, and hopefully it will end soon. Just to remind you, last week, Rafina talked to you about the travel restrictions that are currently in place. And if you have any questions about those, you can certainly watch our video from April 2nd, or feel free to schedule a consultation with us. We're offering free consultations, 15-minute consultations to anyone who has questions about how to navigate the current situation and the current restrictions. And I will post the details in the comment section after our discussion today, so that you can follow the instructions there and schedule a free consultation. So as I said, today we will talk about the impact of COVID-19 on Canadian immigration and citizenship applications. I will cover both the impact on new applications and the impact on pending applications, so the ones that have already been submitted. First, to start off, I will tell you the good news, which is that the Canadian Immigration Department is still accepting new applications, both for temporary residents, so applications such as work permit applications, study permits, visitor visas, for permanent residents as well, express entry, provincial nominations, and for Canadian citizenship. So that's the good news. The not so good news is that there are processing delays that can be expected with all applications. So the immigration offices in Canada and abroad are operating with reduced staff, many of whom are working remotely, just like many of us, and they don't have access to their full office resources. So delays are to be expected. There are no in-person attendances at the offices as well. So I'll talk about a few aspects which can delay the processing aside from the reduced staff. So for example, biometrics. This is the first step that many applicants need to complete when they apply to come to Canada temporarily or on a permanent basis. This means going to a Canadian visa application center outside of Canada or to a Service Canada office in Canada to give fingerprints and to have your photo taken. Biometrics currently cannot be completed in the majority of locations. For example, many Canadian visa application centers outside of Canada are currently closed. Service Canada locations in Canada are also closed. So those applicants who need to give their biometrics in support of an application will face delays in the processing of their application until they are able to give their biometrics. I will just quickly check if questions are coming in. Please feel free to send questions as I am talking about the different points. If you can send a question privately if you don't feel comfortable sharing it in the comments box. You can also send an email. I will try to check all of the platforms before I log off today. I'm hoping to get to as many questions as I can. So The second aspect in which an application can be delayed is the medical examination. Many applicants need to complete a medical exam in support of their application for temporary or permanent residence. However, many doctors in Canada and outside Canada are not currently performing immigration medical exams. And this is something that will further delay your application. And the final aspect that I wanted to address about new applications is the passport submission request so when your application comes to a conclusion and it's approved, if you are from a country that requires a visa, Canadian immigration will ask you to send your passport so that they can issue a visa in your passport, which would then allow you to travel to Canada. This step will also be delayed because of COVID-19 measures. The reason being is that this is normally done through the Canadian visa application centers, many of which are closed, as I mentioned. So you can expect a delay on this front as well. So I'll get to a couple of questions now, and then I will talk about pending applications. So one question I have here, what should I do if I am in Canada and my status will expire soon? So if your status will expire soon, it is very important for you to apply to extend your status. Many individuals may be unable to travel at this point because of the travel restrictions in their own countries, because of reduced flights. So you may be in Canada and you may be forced to stay in Canada in a way. It is very important for you to apply to extend your status, because if you apply before your current status expires, you will benefit from what is known as implied status. What this means is that you will be able to continue staying in Canada as a visitor or working, if that was your the type of permit that you were on, or studying for as long as your application is being processed. But the important part is to apply before your status expires, and then you will have this implied status. If you are in Canada and your status has already expired, there are also options for restoring that status. But you have to file the application within 90 days of your status having expired. However, you do not benefit from implied status if you have allowed your status to expire and you're applying for restoration. I have another question here that is a little fact specific, so I'll try to dissect it. It says, I have a work permit valid until November 2020. If this lockdown happens to extend for a prolonged time and I'm unable to fly back to Australia before the expiration, should I apply to change my visa status to a visitor visa? How do I do that? When do I do that? Can I do it earlier than the expiry date to ensure no issues getting it? And are there any other options to extend my current work permit in this climate? So several questions here, and I've addressed a couple of them already. I'll just go over them briefly again. Should you apply to extend your status? Absolutely. If you cannot leave Canada before your current status expires, you should be applying to extend your status. Do you apply to extend to a visitor visa, or do you apply to extend as a worker? It really depends on your circumstances. If you are currently on a work permit and you're working for an employer who may be willing to support your work permit extensions, and there are a number of ways that this can be done, which won't be the topic today, but we may be addressing it in one of our upcoming discussions. Then you can apply to extend your status as a worker. However, if there's no basis for you to extend your status as a worker, you should be applying to extend as a visitor. And you should absolutely do it sooner rather than later. November 2020 expiry, I would say at this point it's too soon because we don't know what is going to happen in the next few months. So you can certainly give it a few more months and see how this situation develops. Normally, we recommend applying at least 30 days before your status expires. However, in the current climate with delays in application processing, it may be better to apply sooner than that. So maybe 2 or 3 months before your status expires. Again, it will depend on your circumstances, and you're certainly welcome to schedule a consultation with us. As I said, I'll post the instructions about how to schedule a free consultation to answer some of these case-specific questions because everyone's situation is different. Another question that we often get is, can I go to the United States and come back and extend my status at the border? So this process is known as flagpoling, and many individuals rely on it in normal times, let's call it. But during COVID-19, we're not dealing with our run-of-the-mill situation in terms of processing and extending status. So flagpoling is strictly prohibited while the COVID-19 restrictions are in place. And this is important to keep in mind because you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you travel to the border, to the land crossing, and you leave Canada, you get refused entry into the United States, which is what normally happens with flagpoling, and you try to come back to Canada and you can't. So don't do this. Stay put, apply for an extension online. And I discussed the different ways that you can apply for an extension in terms of, extending your current status as a worker or applying to change your status to a visitor. There are several different options, but my recommendation is do not try to flagpole at this time because it could create more problems for you. So let's see if we have any other questions. Okay, so another question, will express entry draws continue? So express entry is the umbrella under which there are several programs for economic immigration to Canada. Express entry itself is not a program under which people apply for permanent residence. It simply is a database from which invitations to apply are sent under the different programs that are available. I won't go into details about those programs today. We may discuss them in one of our future Facebook Live discussions. But just to say that this is designed to meet Canada's long-term economic needs. And after the COVID-19 pandemic, Canada will continue to have a need for immigrants, maybe even more so than in the past. Economy will need to rebound and get back into a good shape. So the expectation is absolutely for express entry rounds of invitations to continue while COVID-19 measures are in place. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago on March 23rd, over 3,000 individuals were invited to apply for permanent residence through express entry. And the minimum score for which an invitation to apply was issued was 467. And this is actually lower than the few rounds before it. So we're hoping that this may be a trend in the direction that a lot of people are looking for, which is lower scores for express entry rounds of invitations, because scores have significantly increased in the last year or so. So everybody is hoping for a trend downwards. Another point that I want to make is that the Immigration Department, IRCC, has extended the deadline to submit an application for permanent residence after you receive an invitation to apply. Normally, the deadline is 60 days, but that has been extended to 90 days. However, as I discussed earlier, there are certain steps that you may not be able to complete even in the 90 days if the current climate continues. So for example, medical exams or some police certificate issuance may be delayed, especially in other countries that are also on lockdowns. So if you are unable to submit the required documents with your application, you should be submitting a letter to explain which documents you're unable to submit, why, and then as soon as you obtain them, submit them to IRCC. That you can do through their web form if it's after you have already submitted your application. Another point that is important is that although express entry rounds of invitations are expected to continue during the COVID-19 measures, the government has announced that invitations to apply under International Experience Class, or IEC, are currently on hold. If you don't know what this program is, it is a program that allows young individuals from a number of different countries to obtain work permits in Canada, working holiday and young professionals, internships. And it's a very popular program, but unfortunately it is currently on hold. No invitations will be issued through this program at this time, and we don't know when it will reopen. Presumably, once some of the COVID-19 restrictions are lifted and things start going back to normal, IEC will reopen as well. So keep that in mind if IEC was part of your plan as a new application. I'd like to move now to pending applications. And as I said at the beginning, IRCC is continuing to accept new applications, and they're continuing to process applications that have already been submitted. So this includes applications for permanent residence, for temporary residence, for Canadian citizenship, and it's applications that are submitted in Canada and outside of Canada. However, again, delays are to be expected with most applications because of the reduced staff at offices inside Canada and outside Canada, the remote working arrangements, and also the travel restrictions, which Rafina discussed last week, are going to impact potentially your ability, if your application is approved, to come to Canada. Other closures that I already mentioned, such as the Canadian Visa Application Centres not being open, they will impact certain steps that need to take place in a pending application. So I will talk about a few measures that the Immigration Department has put in place during COVID-19. Landing for approved permanent residence applicants. So after an application for permanent residence is approved, the final step before you become a permanent resident is called landing. It is an interview, so to speak, where you become a Canadian permanent resident. This can happen at the border, whether it's a land crossing or an airport when you travel to Canada, or it can happen at an office, IRCC office inside Canada. What is important to know about landings at the moment? Given the travel restrictions that are in place, you may not be able to travel to Canada to land as a permanent resident, maybe because of travel restrictions that are in place in your country, or because of the date of approval of your permanent residence application. So for example, if your application was approved before March 18th, 2020, but you have not traveled to Canada yet, you're exempt from the travel restrictions in place, and you would be able to travel to Canada. However, keep in mind that you cannot travel if you have any COVID-19 symptoms. So if you have a fever, if you have a cough, if you have difficulty breathing, you will be denied boarding by the airline personnel. you also have to, and this is mandatory, it's not a choice, you have to isolate for 14 days after you arrive in Canada, even if you don't have any symptoms. This is important, especially if you're traveling to Canada as, a person who will be landed as a permanent resident. So as a new immigrant, you have to have a plan in place for your isolation. They will ask you for your plan before they let you board the flight. And if your plan does not make sense, or does not, if you don't convince them that your plan is solid, you may be denied the ability to travel. And the plan will include, needs to include factors such as where will you stay, how will you get groceries, how will you get, certain documents that are required, because isolating means you cannot leave your house. You go from the airport to the place where you're staying, and for 14 days you don't leave. So you really need to come up with a comprehensive plan, support systems in place. If you have friends or family in Canada, how will this look? You coming to Canada and landing as a permanent resident, and then not being able to go anywhere for 14 days. Another question we're often asked is, what if you're in Canada and your permanent residence application is approved? As you may know, all landing interviews, all in-person appointments for that matter, have been canceled until April 13th, 2020. That's just next week. And given how things are unraveling, it will probably be extended, the cancellations, but there's no official announcement yet. So for anyone who had been invited for a landing interview in Canada, they should have been notified that that appointment was canceled and will be rescheduled. IRCC has noted that they may be conducting landing appointments over the phone, but I have yet to see that rolled out. I do not have any clients who have received an invitation to land over the phone. However, I haven't had any urgent requests for landing. If you require an urgent landing appointment, for example, if any of your documents will expire soon, then my advice would be to contact IRCC through their web form. Just search IRCC web form in your browser, and you'll be able to get to it, and ask for instructions, what you should do, and can you get an urgent landing appointment. One question I have here, my permanent residence application was approved, but I cannot travel to Canada. What should I do? So again, if your documents will expire soon, the confirmation of permanent residence or the permanent resident visa, you should contact IRCC through the web form and explain that you cannot travel before your documents will expire, and ask them, what you should be doing next. What we have heard is that there may be some leeway. Normally these documents cannot be extended, but given the current situation, there may be some leeway with IRCC potentially reissuing these documents when things go back to normal. But it's important to stay in touch with them, let them know you cannot travel, and if your documents are expiring soon, after the situation returns to normal and you are able to travel, send them another web form, ask them to reissue your documents. Also regarding pending applications for temporary and permanent residence, IRCC has confirmed that no application in progress will be closed or refused if there are documents missing. So this is great news, because the last thing you want is for an application to be denied because it's incomplete. So this is a great development from IRCC. IRCC is also providing an automatic 90-day extension to complete any required steps in an application. You don't need to ask them for an extension, it's automatic, and it's across all lines of business. So that's good news. So for example, if you receive a biometric request letter, like many people do, it still has a 30-day deadline on it. But this is automatically extended to 90 days during COVID-19. If IRCC requests any additional information from you and you're unable to provide it within the 90-day deadline, then I would suggest getting in touch with the responsible office processing your application and explaining that you cannot provide these documents and asking for another extension so that you can provide them. Quickly on applications for Canadian citizenship, again, all in-person appointments, which relates to citizenship as well. So citizenship ceremonies, tests, retests, interviews, they have all been canceled until April 13, 2020. This is expected to continue past April 13. You should have, if you have a pending application, you should have received a letter notifying you of the cancellation, and the Immigration Department will be rescheduling these appointments when things return to normal. Again, 90-day extension, automatic. You don't need to request it for any additional documents that need to be provided in support of your application. So let's see our questions here. Just going to check and see if there are any questions. One question I have here, will COVID-19 affect reopening of the OINP? So this is the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, the provincial program in Ontario. Quite popular, especially in the last little while since the express entry points have gone up. Certain streams of the program continue to be open, but a couple of the most popular streams, such as the foreign worker and the international student, are not open. They actually only reopened for a few hours about a month or so ago and closed very quickly. When will it reopen? Unfortunately, we don't know at this time. There has been no official announcement. The OINP has provided a summary of the invitations issued last year, and a lot of them were through express entry for the streams that qualified for those streams of the program. And we don't know if the situation will be the same this year. Ontario has not received its provincial nomination allocation yet, so they don't know how many people they will be able to nominate. So the best I can say at this point is keep checking their website for updates. That is the way that we find out when a program is reopening, and just be ready to apply as soon as the program reopens, because it could be closing within a couple of hours like it happened last time. Okay, another question I have here. My work permit will expire in 3 months. When should I apply for an extension? So I already discussed this. Just to emphasize, this depends on a lot of factors. What kind of a work permit are you on? Do you have employer support for the extension? Is your work permit extendable? So for example, the IEC work permits are not. Some employer-specific ones may require an employer to get a new labor market impact assessment. So it really depends on your circumstances. Generally, a couple of months before in the current climate would be best to reapply. But also, if you want to discuss your specific circumstances, feel free to schedule a consultation. Again, I will post the information about our free consultations in the comment section when I've finished this discussion. I think I have time for one more question. Let me just double check here. Okay, I have one question that I previously received. Again, feel free to send us questions privately, either through Facebook Messenger or email, and we'll make sure to include them in the appropriate Facebook Live discussion. So the final question I'll answer is the following. I need to renew my permanent resident card. Should I apply now or wait? So again, this will depend on your individual circumstances. For example, are you in Canada? Are you continuing to get days of physical presence in Canada, which you need to qualify for renewal? Or are you outside of Canada? As I mentioned, IRCC is accepting new applications, so you can certainly apply now. Just expect some delays. However, if you are, for example, just over the 730 days that are required in the last 5 years to meet the requirements for renewing your permanent resident card, wait. If you're in Canada, you'll continue to get days of physical presence, so it doesn't hurt to wait with your application and submit it later when you have more days. However, if you're outside of Canada and you're not continuing to get those days of physical presence, then you may be better off applying for the permanent resident card sooner rather than later. However, keep in mind, if you're currently outside of Canada, you won't be able to submit the permanent resident card renewal application. So you need to get back to Canada, which may be a challenge given the current travel restrictions. As a permanent resident, you're able to come back. The travel restrictions that I'm referring to here are the reduced flights and potentially travel restrictions, lockdowns in your country of origin. So keep in mind all those factors when you're deciding about the timing. So that wraps up our discussion for today. Thank you for joining me. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with us. As I said, I will post in the comments section the instructions on how you can schedule a free consultation with Rafina or myself. We're just trying to do our part to help out during these difficult times, which is the reason why we're providing these free consultations. A lot of people, don't necessarily need a full-on consultation at this point. They just want to ask a couple of quick questions. We're here to help you. Please get in touch with us. Let us know if there are any topics that you'd like us to cover on future Facebook Live discussions or any questions that you may have. So thank you for joining me today. Stay safe and have a great day. Take care.